Welcome back. Today we're going to spend a few words on the NiceHCK DB3. So NiceHCK had a model called the NX7, which is more like a $75 IEM, and tons of people talk about it. Really good things to say about it. So a while back, the DB3 went on sale. There was like one of those fan exclusive only sales for $17, so I ended up buying it. And what originally attracted me to it was the DB3. The 3 actually is 1 BA and 2 dynamic drivers. And I'm like, I don't think I have another 1 BA, 2 dynamic drivers. But it's also a graphene diaphragm with the titanizing dome. So, oh, sounds interesting. I like bass. Should be good for bass. And it's big brother, the NX7, had a lot of good things to say about it, so I bought it, and it arrived a while back, and I just haven't had time to get to it. But with 1111 coming up, I saw that it's actually coming back down, probably a little cheaper than I bought it for, $16, $17, and that again, that's directly from the NiceHCK audio store and AliExpress. And so this is kind of what comes in the box. This is stock cable. So stock cable is kind of reminiscent of a KZ cable, maybe a little thicker braid. Color is a little more silverish, greenish than brownish, like KZ. And these guys are not quite QDCs. These are QDCs with the square, which is probably works on a blonde. Nice pouch comes with it. And the earbud itself is actually reminiscent of the ZSN Pro as well. It's got this, clear resin shell and really nice looking metal backplate. Super nice. And these are 2-pin 0.78 millimeters. This is actually a NiceHCK cable that I've had for a while. Copper cable, dual pins. Memory foam tips, which I was hoping would knock down some of the treble, so that was why I have it configured like that. So let's kind of get into sound-wise what this thing sounds like. And dual drivers, right? I'm like, Daft Punk's Get Lucky. It's got to sound pretty awesome, right? Because it's got a really heavy bass sound to it, and on the good pairs with heavy bass head things, you get a lot of mid bass, and then you get this kind of follow-on sub bass, and it kind of fills your head with a warm, rich bass sound. So not quite what you get out of these guys. So these guys are indeed V-shaped, and they have 2 dynamic drivers, but the bass is definitely tuned more faster, colder, more faster and precise and more detailed than Get Lucky's, which is kind of a warmer, slower bass sound. So these guys are tuned not quite for that song, but what you do notice is sort of the timbre, how everything sounds pretty natural. All the instruments, all the voices, all that sounds quite good for $16 or $17. The bass is different than the ZSN Pro, but the instruments and probably the wider range of sound quality across instruments is probably better. Not probably, I think it's definitely better on the DB3. Does the bass, sub bass, not so much my favorite because it's faster. I definitely like a slower decay. I like the bass to kind of warm up, especially the whole lower half of songs and voices and all that stuff. These guys are definitely kind of faster and a colder sound, which works better for different genres than I listen to, but that's the general gist of what happens on the lower V side. On the upper V side, on the treble, I think it's more predominant, and everyone says, oh, these have such strong bass, there's 2 dynamic drivers, but when you're listening to a song and everything is kind of faster and half stepped up a little bit, it almost feels like the treble is actually in the high mids are more dominant than the lower, because the lower kicks in when it needs to, but it's almost always higher and faster, no matter what you're listening to. So yeah, it's kind of an odd sound signature that's not quite my thing, but if that sounds like it's your thing, then check out the DB3s. So with Get Lucky, you're kind of sitting in mids and lowers. There's not really too much treble in it, so you don't really notice it. And we'll talk a little bit later about what happens on the higher side. So when I first got it, I had stock cable, stock ear tips, and it was pretty fatiguing. And if you read every review, I think everyone says kind of similar things. Get rid of the cable, put better tips on it, and you'll kind of fill out the sound. It'll be less fatiguing. So I did that. That was the first day stock. Couldn't really listen to it that long. Got really fatigued. Second day, switched to cables. Started working through the playlist. It's better. And so MAKO's Smoke-Filled Room was kind of the first song that kind of caught my ear. It's sounding like everything sounds just about right. The beginning of the song, male voice, so it's the lower side. It's a slower song. It kind of builds up into the second half of the song. But the first half, that bass, where it doesn't go too low, it kind of hangs out in that mid-bass range, and the instruments are all the mids. That all works really well because of sort of the natural sound that this thing does. You don't catch yourself thinking, that sounds kind of weird. It all sounds just about right. And when that song kind of passes the halfway mark and it speeds up into a higher range, then it gets a little more fatiguing, and you notice the treble kind of kick in, and then it wasn't my favorite part. And so that one song kind of showed me both sides of the DB3, and you don't run into that all that often, but on that particular song, for me, the second half is everything that I don't really like about the DB3. Everything is just too high. It starts to pierce your ears, and it becomes hard to listen to for a long time. So then, my playlist is alphabetical. So M83 is Midnight City. Is sort of this modern synthy song. You'll catch it at the end of movies or kind of slow, dramatic parts of movies or TV shows. Very cool song. Check it out if you haven't heard it before. But it stays in that kind of synth range where there's not really any hard bass sound to it. Lots of synth, and then it all hangs out in this perfect range, which is the range of this thing that sounds in its sweet spot for me. So that was the first song where I'm like, oh, okay, this is where I need to be. And to take that one step further, it's like the 80s sound. It's drum machine drums, where you get a very hard mid-bass punch, which is what this thing will do with its dual drivers. Surprisingly good, but not enough sub bass for me. As they say, it'll do sub bass when you ask it to, and that's actually true. But I like the bass, especially the lower bass, to kind of fill in, make everything sound a little warmer, give everything a little more depth and richness to it. But that's not what the 80s were about, and that's what Howard Jones' Things Can Only Get Better is, like a classic 80s sound. Synth, male voice, it's got some horns, which will show you where this kind of goes into a comfortable upper range without hurting your ears. So when I hit that song, I'm like, oh, okay, this thing is right there. Don't go too hard into the bass drums where you're looking for a sub bass follow on or a rumble or anything like that. It'll rumble if you ask it to, like in Lord's Royals, it'll do that, but again, the decay will be pretty quick, and you'll think to yourself, oh, that was too quick. So if you want to take this to its kind of logical modern conclusion, Armin van Buuren's Wild Wild Sun, same thing. All the bass hits are very mid bass, but it's very fast, kind of it's EDM, especially the club mix, male voice. It kind of wraps up everything that I liked about this sound, without it becoming fatiguing. So yeah, if you want to, there's actually a slower version. The Wild Wild Sun regular version is slower. The Club Mitch is much faster, more EDM, and that's about as far as I wanted to take this particular pair without getting too fatigued on the higher side. So Kanye West Power, I thought of it. So in general, along with the natural instrument sounds, it's kind of weird for this price range, but the soundstage is the second piece of that. What are you getting for 17 bucks or 19 bucks that's different than other pairs? Those two. Very natural sound, and the soundstage is the ZSN Pro had a very narrow soundstage, and that was what everyone's kind of complaint was, and everyone's like, well, it's 15 bucks or 17 bucks, whatever it is, it makes sense. So now you get Kanye West Power, and we talked about this with the Blonde. You know, Kanye West should be kind of right in front of you. The vocals should be right there, nice and clear, and that's what this does super well. Vocals kind of across the range sound really good. We'll talk about a couple that are not so good, but male vocals right there in your head, right where they should be. Instruments far enough off to the side, just beyond your ears. And particularly in that song, there's a female, maybe it's Rihanna, I don't know who sings the hook, just behind Kanye. And so you actually get a pretty nice width and depth, in that one song, coming clear through on the DB3. So I thought that is another interesting thing about this price range and what the DB3 in particular did compared to what the ZSN Pro did. And then on the not so good side, like I said, sort of the higher voices got, the more fatiguing it got for me, and in particular, Ellie Goulding and Justin Bieber. I mean, I never thought of them having voices in the same range, but when he sings in that falsetto high, they're pretty much right there together. And both of those got super fatiguing for me, and something in particular about where they're singing, and some peak here, but yeah, it just hits you right in the eardrum, and you don't want to do that for too long. Second, so Adele, like I said, on the bass side, this thing's got dual drivers, dual drivers. Commit to it, throw a lot of heavy bass, you let it fill out voices, and in particular, Adele, she has that lower range. When she sings low, it should be rich and full. There should be a lot of weight to it. And these guys are sort of more like that 80s drum machine where it's a mid-bass punch, but there's no real weight behind it. And that kind of comes through in her voice. The lower end of it just is thin. There's no richness to it. So that one kind of popped out at me, especially coming from the Blonde or something else where you get a lot of warmth and fill in from the bass side. And on these guys, it's a faster, precise, different type of signature than the Blonde. So U2's Beautiful Day, another cool song, and it just kind of popped out at me because the beginning is sparse. It's Bono is singing, and there's a couple of notes going on around him, but it's generally pretty sparse. It's like kind of a dead mouse for rock version. And on this particular song, Bono's voice is like really recessed, like probably right at the bottom of the V. But I think they master the song that way. So it's not like his voice should be super in your face. It's always recessed a little bit. And then this kind of takes it to the next level, and it's like way back. And then the sound, which you should be here, is sort of faint and low anyway. And then on the DB3, it sort of disappears. And at some point, I kind of caught myself like, well, where did all the instruments go? There's like no music. I just hear Bono off in the distance singing. And so if you have music that kind of falls right where this is recessed enough, it sounded kind of weird. Nothing like Get Lucky, which is sort of at the other end of it, was everything, the timbre, the quality of the voices and the instruments and the sounds, all that sounds pretty spot on. And then you get to Beautiful Day, and it's like, nothing really sounds right. Can't listen to this for too long. So that's the wrap up on the DB3. Like I said, I bought it a while back, and it'll be back around that same price on 11/11. So if this is of interest to you, I would check it out. No one sent it to me. I bought this with my money. So that's it. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.